From the first moment the dog lunged at the steel bars of his enclosure, snarling like something born from fury and fire, the entire training base knew he was unlike any creature they had ever seen. His eyes burned with a wildness that didn't just warn people away, it dared them to try. Every handler who came near him stepped back with trembling hands. Every soldier who attempted to tame him left with deep scratches or deeper fear. And every trainer, no matter how seasoned, eventually muttered the same defeated sentence: "This K9 is untrainable." But no one knew the truth behind that rage, no one understood what he carried in his chest, and no one believed he could ever belong to a human again. That belief held strong, unshaken and unchallenged, until the day the SEAL woman walked in. Lieutenant Aurora Hale wasn't the kind of woman people forgot. Her presence was quiet but commanding, the kind that made even the loudest rooms fall still without her saying a word. She had survived deployments no one spoke about, carried scars no one asked about, and bore a calmness that only those who had stood at the edge of life could truly embody. Aurora didn't boast, didn't threaten, didn't raise her voice, but she didn't need to. Her reputation was enough. When the Navy called her in to evaluate the rogue military K9 named Rogue, it was out of desperation, not hope. Rogue had already been scheduled for removal from the program. His aggression was too dangerous, his unpredictability too costly. But Aurora had a history of turning lost causes into legends, and though no one believed in the dog anymore, they believed in her. Even so, when she stepped toward Rogue's enclosure for the first time, several trainers warned her to stay back. Rogue was pacing with his teeth bared, muscles coiled like a tripwire. But she didn't stop. She stood there, steady, as if facing a storm she had already survived 100 times. The dog hurled himself toward her, a thunderbolt of muscle and rage crashing against the barrier between them. Trainers flinched, one even curse whispered under his breath, expecting Aurora to jump back in fear. She didn't. Instead, she lowered her gaze to the dog's level, not as a challenger but as someone trying to understand something unseen. Rogue growled, chest rising like a drumbeat of war, but something in Aurora's stillness made him hesitate for a fraction of a second, the kind of moment that carries the weight of possibility. It wasn't a connection yet. It wasn't trust. But it was the first crack in his armor of anger, a tiny space where something softer could breathe. Aurora spent days just watching him. While others expected her to rush the training, to impose control, she sat quietly outside the enclosure, studying the patterns of Rogue's movements, the rhythm of his aggression, the moments when the fury dimmed just enough to glimpse the pain beneath. She noticed how he only barked when someone approached too fast, how he trembled after his own outbursts, how his eyes darted not with dominance but with fear. She noted every detail, every sign, every scar, especially the jagged one across his right shoulder. It wasn't a training injury. It was deeper, older, filled with a history no one bothered to uncover. Aurora realized then that Rogue wasn't resisting training. He was surviving memories. One night, long after the base had gone quiet, Aurora sat outside Rogue's enclosure with nothing but a canteen of water and a faint lamp. The dog paced in anxious circles, restless as if haunted. She didn't speak to him. She simply existed near him, offering presence without pressure. Slowly, over hours, his pacing softened. His breathing steadied. When he finally lay down, exhausted, Aurora closed her eyes and breathed with him, matching his rhythm, sinking her calm to his unease. And for the first time since he arrived at the base, Rogue slept soundly. No growling. No pacing. Just sleep. The next morning, something changed. Rogue didn't charge the bars when Aurora approached. He didn't bare his teeth. He only stood still, watching her with wary curiosity. This was the moment Aurora knew she had earned something rare, not trust, not yet, but permission. Permission to try. The first breakthrough came when she entered the enclosure alone. The room held its breath. Trainers positioned themselves near tranquilizers, convinced she was seconds away from being mauled. But Aurora walked in slowly, eyes soft, posture low, voice steady. Rogue stared at her, muscles twitching, instincts torn between attack and uncertainty. But she didn't push. She simply held out her hand and waited. It took 5 long, trembling minutes before Rogue moved. His steps were small, heavy, hesitant, as if every inch forward was a battle against the ghosts in his mind. When his nose touched her hand, the base erupted in shock. But Aurora didn't celebrate. She knew this wasn't victory. This was surrender, the kind that comes not from weakness but from finally finding a safe place to fall. Training began with baby steps. Aurora never used force. She relied on connection, timing her breaths to calm his surges, matching his movements to guide his impulses. She learned his triggers and eased him through them. When he panicked, she grounded him. When he growled, she steadied him. When he failed, she didn't punish him. She taught him how to begin again without fear. The bond forming between them wasn't typical. It wasn't just handler and dog, it was 2 broken warriors recognizing each other's scars. Over weeks, Rogue transformed. His snarls softened into alert readiness. His wildness sharpened into focus. His aggression melted into loyalty. But the most powerful change wasn't in his behavior, it was in his eyes. The fire remained, but now it burned with purpose, not pain. The trainers could hardly believe it. The dog they had labeled uncontrollable now obeyed with a precision that bordered on breathtaking. And through it all, Rogue never took his gaze off Aurora. She had become his anchor, his compass, the one steady force in a world that had once abandoned him. Then came the mission no one expected. A Navy reconnaissance team had lost contact in a hostile zone. They needed a fast, silent, highly responsive K-9 to navigate narrow escape routes the team couldn't access. Rogue was the only dog with the instincts sharp enough and the agility fierce enough to make the attempt. But the risk was enormous. Sending him into live combat could trigger every old fear inside him. It could undo months of progress. Or worse, it could get him killed. The decision tore at Aurora. She knew what Rogue could do. She also knew what he could lose. The night before deployment, Aurora sat beside Rogue in the soft darkness of the K-9 unit. His head rested against her knee, heavy with trust. She placed her hand on his scarred shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath, and she understood that he wasn't just ready for the mission, he needed it. Not to prove himself. Not to please her. But to rewrite the story of his life. To show the world that he was not what his past made him, but what he chose to become. On the mission, Rogue was flawless. He moved like shadow and lightning combined, leading the team through collapsed structures, hidden paths, and deadly traps. He signaled danger before humans sensed it. He located the trapped reconnaissance unit. And in one heart-stopping moment, when the air filled with gunfire and dust, Rogue shielded a wounded soldier with his own body, refusing to move until Aurora reached them. The team survived because of him. And when they returned to base, battered but alive, Rogue walked beside Aurora not as a rescued dog, but as a hero. News of his transformation spread throughout the Navy. Trainers who once feared him now stared with awe. Soldiers saluted him as he passed. But Rogue didn't seem to care for the attention. The only thing that mattered to him was Aurora. Their bond was unshakable, forged through patience, understanding, and the unspoken truth that broken souls often recognize each other long before the world does. Aurora filed a request to adopt Rogue as her official K-9 partner, a rare honor reserved only for the strongest, most loyal, most exceptional dogs. The approval came with a handwritten note from the commander: "For the SEAL who did the unthinkable, you didn't just train him, you healed him." And in that moment, Aurora realized something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: peace. Rogue wasn't the only one who had needed saving. If this story touched your heart in any way, please consider supporting the video. It helps us continue sharing stories like this with the world. Special request: comment below, What part of Rogue and Aurora's journey